I'd like to welcome Janis Hill, author of Bonnie's Story, A Blonde's Guide to Mathematics, and whose new book, ISIS, Vampires and Ghosts, Oh My, has also been picked up by Hague Publishing. Janis, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I grew up in Darwin, moved to Brisbane for about 8 years, and now live up in the Adelaide Hills. A husband, 3 children, lots of animals, and I work in IT sometimes.
When did you start writing?
Basically, when they started teaching me to write, I started writing. Since I learned to construct sentences, that was it. I've been writing, stories since then.
Yeah, and how long since you actually, well, stories, yes, how long since you started writing full-length manuscripts?
Full-length manuscripts, I'd say Bonnie's Story is probably the first one, and that was at what was it, 45,000 words or something. Before that, I was only managing about 20 to 21,000, which is kind of more your novella sort of level. But to me, ISIS is probably my first real manuscript, where it was actually just under 100,000. So I thought, woohoo, I'm in the big league now. So.
Yeah, I'll have to say that editing a book of 45,000 is a lot easier and shorter than doing 100,000. I hadn't actually picked up that ISIS was 100,000, so that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Until I have to start editing it. So what were you doing with those novellas and short stories that you were writing beforehand?
Not a lot, really. I basically would have to write to get them out of my head, and then just put them to one side and either have my small fan base of wonderful friends that I've grown up with or siblings enjoy reading them, or not much else really, just put it to one side and start on the next one.
Okay. In one of your blogs, you indicated that one of your goals was for quarterly royalty payments to allow you to go to your favourite chocolatier cafe for a hot chocolate and brownie.
Yep.
In that same article, you indicated that you write because you have to, and as you've just been saying, not because you feel it's going to make you rich. How important, though, is it for you to have your books read?
I guess it's fairly important, to be honest. I guess I do want them to be read. That's half of why I've written them. But I also enjoy reading them myself, so I don't know if that really counts as much.
Yeah, I think it does.
Yeah, and not so much as, I think when I ask for it to be read, it's because I want to make sure I've done it right. It's like, well, I've enjoyed reading it, but what about you? So I don't really need, the acclaim, but a pat on the head of, yeah, that was enjoyable, well done, would be good. So
yeah. How do you go about writing? Well, with Bonnie's Story and with ISIS, how did you go about writing the story? Was it an organic process, or did you actually have a structure in mind before you started?
I very rarely have a structure. I've tried to do structures and they just don't work for me. I get little bits and pieces of the stories just churning over as thoughts in my head when I'm daydreaming and procrastinating. And then it just starts to piece together like a jigsaw puzzle until I've got the whole thing laid out. And to be honest, sometimes when I'm writing, I don't even realise that that's going to happen in the story until I've written it down and gone, oh, is that what's happening? Oh, cool. So, yeah, it's very organic.
Yeah. What type of books do you enjoy reading?
Ooh, many. Lots.
And how does that influence the books that you've actually written?
I think the writing style has probably influenced it the most. I really do like the tongue-in-cheek kind of sense of humour that I've now started to write. And, it springs to mind that one of my favourite authors has just passed away, and that was Elizabeth Peters, who also wrote as Barbara Michaels. And she wrote the Amelia Peabody series, and that's what really got me into the first-person sort of narrative that I now enjoy through others like Kim Harrison and Mary Janice Davidson and authors like that. But I'm very eclectic. I will read different levels of murder mysteries. I will read the paranormal. I will read, gardening books. So it really, as long as it's something that's interesting me at that time or at least grabs my attention, I will read it.
Yep. Now, what are you actually reading at the moment?
At the moment, I am reading Agatha Raisin's, The Wizard of Evesham, which is about a hairdresser. So it's still, with those hairdressers in me, it doesn't go very far.
What words of advice do you have for aspiring writers?
Right. Basically, if you think you've got it in you, don't just go, oh, I'm going to write a book. Write it all down. Don't stop and then finely tune, edit every single chapter every time you do it. Just write and write and write until it is finished, and then chip away at it and polish it and fine tune it and things like that. But just get it out, get it written down so you can say, I have it, rather than, oh, I'm going to do that one day.
Mm. And look, I think that advice is very good. Just want to push it a little bit further, because one of the interesting things I've discovered with launching Hague Publishing is that we've had 3 or 4 submissions received from 14, 15, 16-year-old girls, no boys. And some of those books, those manuscripts are unfinished. So at what stage did you think that your manuscripts were actually ready to go out to try and get published?
Well, when I felt that I could really put the end on them, which I know it sounds silly, but it's sort of like with one of my other stories that you are aware of but is not out there, which is Grey. I've been working on that for over 10 years, but I still don't think it's finished. I still don't think it's ready for, proper publication, which you agree with. But with Bonnie's story, I felt that, yes, it had the typical beginning, middle, and an end, and I even had the punctuation of the end on it. And it was, to me, it was ready, but it wasn't as if I wrote it all and ta-da. I did actually sit there and, is this where it's going to finish? Do I really need to write more? What's happening? And it was almost as if they all turned their backs on me and walked away, and I knew, okay, they're done. This story's over. It doesn't mean there's not going to be another one. It just means they're done.
Yeah.
And I knew.
Now, you've mentioned a husband, animals, kids.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I've discovered with these really young authors is that when they're actually writing about something they know about, elves in school, well, the actual bit about the in school bit works really well, or there was a really strong, it's a type of disaster type book, but it was only when the writer was writing from the perspective of a young girl that it rang true. When she was trying to write as an older male soldier, it was just nothing there. So how is your life experience? How did that actually assist with Bonnie, do you think?
I like to play the blonde. For a very long time, I was a blonde. I was born a blonde, but then it darkened. But I have been in customer service with IT for 16 plus years, and I have actually discovered you have to be ditzy. You have to let them think that you're a blonde for them to actually be comfortable with dealing with you. If you're this pushy, bossy kind of person, they're sort of like, oh, I don't want to talk to you. I'll stick with my broken computer, thank you. But if you act the blonde, you act the fool, you get through to them better. And I just wanted to put that through with Bonnie. And I am bossy. I am opinionated. I like chocolate. So she is a part of me, but she's the blonde part of me that I probably left behind when I became the mum and the wife and the wrangler of beasts. So, but yeah, it is writing from the heart, so to speak, and it is my science background giving me that, what would happen if, I know it really wouldn't, but what would happen if we could really do this? What would happen if, you could write words in the air? But yeah, it's basically, I have my inner blonde, and that's Bonnie, I guess. Yeah.
And you mentioned your science background. Can you go into a little bit more detail about that?
Well, it's not my personal science background. I mean, I did IT in university and everything, but I actually pretty much grew up in the science building of what is now the Charles Darwin University. It's gone through many names over the years, but we'll call it that. And I really did grow up. My father was a structural engineer, so he tested all the building materials, concretes and timbers, and all of that, just to see if they were strong enough, because they were still building Darwin after Cyclone Tracy. So this is back in the late 70s, early 80s. And There was also next door you'd have your entomologists, and they'd come over to our place and put their insect traps up to see what insects were coming back into Darwin after the cyclone. You'd have your zoologists putting their fly netting up, and you'd get bats in the evening and birds during the day, and you'd have your geologists looking at what erosion was happening in the wet season after the cyclone. And these were the people I hung out with. I'd sort of like be picked up from school. My dad would then go back to the university, and that was our playground sort of thing. That's what we did. We, you know, sat with these other scientists, or we watched my father teaching his classes, and it just kind of rubbed off on you.
Okay, look, I think that's a really good link into talking about Bonnie's story.